Some of the comments that we'll be making today are ones that have been heard before by people on a Friday night, but I'm delighted that there is an expression that we have in our Siddur that says, as we say the Shema, Pa'amayim bi'ahava. So the fact is of doing something twice with love. Please understand then that we're inviting you into that love experience, especially if some of you have heard this before. There is a well-known thought that one doesn't just simply, as a rabbi, stand in somebody else's congregation. So the thought is that with clergy, we would say birashut. So in asking from Rabbi Farber and Rabbi Weissman, now on sabbatical, with their permission. You notice that my kippah has the emblems of both United States and Israel by way of seeing the flags that are there, telling us that there's meant to be something of us in United States, asking questions of what can we do for Israel. And so there are different kinds of purposes that we can see inside ourselves, but the fact is that we're among those who were representatives of Beth Torah, going to Israel either as volunteers to affirm Israel, parts of the land of Israel, some who are watching on live stream at this moment, and some others who are here that have recently been to Israel. The essential thing is we're watching. We're watching what's going on for Israel, what's going on in Israel. And this Mishaberach list that I've created for myself for all of our weeks together, I was able to bring that same Mishaberach list to Israel. And every single day while serving in Israel or as a tourist, I was able to think about those people, some of them who are here today, some who are watching on live stream, to know that we bring our real hearts to Israel when we go. So we need to get the hostages home. Some of us are wearing our medallions or wearing our dog tags. I will tell you as a cute thing that while Annette and I were in a museum, purchased something and someone said, "Oh, you get a discount because you're a veteran." It's true, I am a veteran, but they thought this dog tag was indicating that, when really this is of a higher, more holy purpose than that of simply being a veteran in years past. But we spoke 2 weeks ago on a Friday night, and today I want to give some extra thought, not just about Israel, but a prayer that we said this morning. The prayer that we said was, Habocher biyamo Yisrael biyahava. It says, the one who chooses his people Israel with love. But every one of us is choosing that people Israel with love. That's why we're here communicating with each other, that there is that room for finding a measure of love that's greater than what we had before, especially because of what we're paying attention to, what's going on at Israel and Israel. But there's a special need for people like you, just in listening to and voting love for Israel, choosing to maintain a love for the people of Israel, for the land of Israel, for the state of Israel with its challenges. So people this week are seeing 9 airlines undoing reservations and flights to Israel, but not El Al. So we flew on El Al. We both feared that airlines would be affected by a possible skirmish, and in doing so, those people who chose the cheaper flights, admittedly, they're the ones that were blocked from being able to go back to Israel or to visit Israel. So today I'm hoping that there's some ways that we can connect more about Israel. And I'd like to have us think a little bit about ya-da-da-da-da-da, ya-da-da-da-da. So how do you respond to Hatikva? We sing it, We hum its melody, inspiring melody, and we're inspired by it, and all of the above. But among the main things that hymn contributes is our hope is not lost. Od lo avda tikvatenu, or some of us remember it, Od lo avda tikvatenu. It went one octave higher to tell us that hope is meant to be elevated. Stronger than our hope is not lost, our hope is affirmed. But Hatikva has its own history. It was recorded with different words by the late Jewish singer Al Jolson in 1948. It was the first stanzas of a 9-stanza poem, Tikvatenu, Our Hope, written by Naftali Hertz Imber, an alcoholic but an inspired 1870s Zionist poet. He expressed that a Jewish heart has embedded in it a Jewish soul that yearns, a Jewish eye that looks towards the east and Zion and to Jerusalem. So let me translate for you what were his original different words. Our hope is not yet lost, that ancient hope to return to the land of our ancestors, to the city in which David settled. The official lyrics, as we know, are now the ones that we have sung, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion. It was officially proclaimed as the national anthem of Israel, but some people even wanted that Yerushalayim Shel Zahav was going to be, right, Jerusalem of gold, was going to be the national anthem. It didn't win, but either way, what a unique national anthem for a unique nation. If you think about it, Hatikva makes no references to military. No bombs bursting in air. No defeating the enemy. No fighting with our blood, as are in the anthems of the United States, Sudan, Egypt, Ireland, and France. Instead, it talks about our hope, and it reminded us there was a covenant with Abraham and our ancestors, and there's a yearning to go back and embrace the places our ancestors had walked and settled, as we certainly read 42 different locations today, but that built upon God's promise. And somehow that song was sung by the survivors of Bergen-Belsen in 1945. So what is that hope? How do we hold on to it? How are we part of it? That's a generation to generation, international, and even held by different faiths. It stands for God's loving partnership. As I've learned, the hope, it was held by Jews and many Christians as well. I and my wife Annette are thankful that we could go to Israel, see ourselves as part of the support of Israel and the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, Tzahal, and to come back to you with what our heart experienced, our eyes saw, and envisioned. We're grateful that our rabbis invited us to share with you both Friday night when we came back and this first Saturday morning of August about a trip to Israel unlike any others in the past for us. We wore Israeli IDF military uniforms. We experienced the love of Israel from so many Jewish and non-Jewish men and women both. Just as our special members, Edgardo and Sandra Amar, had spoken to the synagogue of their volunteerism, we similarly are here to talk about our assignment. From them and Gabi Raskovsky, we had much encouragement. They even offered to step in case our acceptance were delayed. With thanks to the trust of the coordinators of Sarel, meaning service to the people of Israel, we stand before you. A bit of background. Back in 1982, as Rabbi Farber referenced for the situation now, Israel had to conduct its own army operations at the Lebanese border at the expense of farms that had to be tended but were abandoned by farmers who served in the reserves or were called up to defend Israel. Aharon Davidi, commander of paratroop and infantry, came up with a strategy to get volunteers, and that number rose in 1982-83 to 650 from the United States and beyond, who could come to be part of an agricultural force, the Volunteers for Israel to turn to Sar-El as a national project for the volunteers, known as this Service for Israel. It's now represented in more than 30 countries. What a dream. It wouldn't surprise you that some volunteers have either moved to Israel or have come multiple times, sometimes in the same year. It's estimated that over the course of time, since it started in 1983, more than 240,000 people have come as volunteers and as you gathered over and over again. Please visualize with me how many different impulses people could have to visit Israel, and that the 37 of us, of which 7 were not Jewish, came out of love for Israel. In our first session together as a group, as we spoke about what motivated us to come on Sar-El, we heard over and over again people who have loved Israel for many years. We're reminded by their Christian pastors that God's promises were to Abraham and to the Jewish people, for Israel and for Zion. The harm and threats to Israel since October 7th invited many of us to ask, what more can I do for Israel? You've signed petitions. We've appeared in rallies. We've written checks. Our own answer was, let's go and let's serve. So we all had asked, how do we help Israel, beloved Israel, if I live elsewhere? So great that thousands of people have asked the same question since 1983. But since October 7th, we and others have been asking, how do I give myself to Israel that has been mercilessly attacked and wounded physically and emotionally and misunderstood and assaulted by a world blind to a reality where terrorists and terrorism are reconciled by inaccurate grasps of history and distortions of truth, and by nearly 1 billion people who clamor for an Israel empty of Jews. 37 of us in different physical conditions and a range of ages, determined to do something not just for Israel, but for support for the Israeli soldiers and to work alongside them, to bring our stamina to do hard work for the military, and to bring pride internationally from an interfaith community. For 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, choice was up to us. We worked hard all day with an energy supply of love for Israel, love and caring for the people of Israel. An underlying theme of the Sar-El program, become a partner to save lives. Our mission to provide essential aid in times of need. At this point, working with critical medical supplies and life-saving gear was what we breathed for our 5 days of assignment. My work week, different from Annette's, was for us to sift through medical equipment back from areas of battle, to repurpose, filter the good reusable packages of bandages, compression kits, IVs, transfusion solutions, respirators, and even tourniquets by the thousands. The destination now was for them to return to Gaza, and 6 of us, in the hands of our supervisor, Priel, we tried to bring dedication that would be inspiring. So in today's Torah reading, we read words of encouragement and strengthening. We're really in awareness of completing an assignment, yet knowing it's incomplete. What do we do today? We finish the book of the Midbar, saying, what's next? Obviously, we know that next week, actually starting this afternoon, is looking at the book of Devarim. So we, in the same way, have been allowed to ask ourselves different sets of what's next? What's next for hostages? What's next for Israel? What's next for us for Israel? To be blessed in just being volunteers. Valued volunteers saluting Israel and saluted for volunteering by the IDF soldiers that worked with us. That's why we're there. Some need the means to volunteer. Perhaps some of us who cannot go might be willing to defray costs for others to consider volunteering, helping out Israel in some creative ways. So this people of Israel is blessed, and all we could wish was to add our blessings, our strength, our encouragement, and our readiness to serve. Od lo avda tikvatenu. our hope is not lost. And to embody Hatikva there and here, to testify our hope, yours and ours, is not lost, that hope of thousands of years. We're ready to help any of you or those online who wish to do service to the peoplehood of Israel through Sarel, sacred service to the people of Israel and to the IDF, Am Yisrael Chai. And now I get to listen to Annette.
Thank you again to Beth Torah for giving us this opportunity. It's quite an honor to be able to be here in front of you. Even before I left, I'm going to start with impressions first. I was speaking to someone who said, "It's so nice you're going to help your country." And I wasn't sure how to take that, because we have heard how some people try to use that as dual citizenship ideas for Jews here in America. So I responded and I said, well, this is my country, but my heart is in Israel. And that was how I was able to deflect possible criticism, which I'm not sure she had, but I wasn't sure, about our coming trip. Before we entered Sarel, upon entering the country, I was told something I'd never heard before on the trips that we had led congregational tours during the years. The security guard said, "Welcome home." Now, this is the first time I've heard that. I don't remember hearing it before. And it just struck me as so important to what I was about to be doing. As we left that guard, we were passed on to go to the baggage claim. Every few feet were pictures of the hostages with their names on them and pictures their kids drew. It's kind of like on every single pew going down the aisle to the baggage claim was another name and a face of a hostage and thoughts that people had about them. I have to say that was amazing to me, because I don't know if you were ever in the Vietnam War, but you might have heard people saying 28,000 people died. 14,000 people were killed in Mekong, and these were names, these were faces, these were people that we can relate to. So from there, we stayed a few days in Tel Aviv, walking around, because normally with tours, it's here's this museum, now get back on the bus, we're going to Jerusalem. So we felt we didn't really know Tel Aviv too well. And as you were walking around, you wouldn't know there was a war on. People were shopping, young people were eating out, they were walking around even in the middle of the day. This occurred in Jerusalem too at the end of our trip. But they were all living in the moment, and I am sure you have heard that phrase before, but we really saw it happening before our eyes. We went to the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, which is a very lovely small museum with early impressionistic paintings brought over from Germany just before 1939, so they wouldn't be lost or taken. I never knew Edward Munch did other paintings other than The Scream. I'm looking at all these Edmund Munch, and this man bought them all up and brought them over just before. Outside the Tel Aviv Museum of Art was an exhibition of hostage commemorations. This was on their Hostages Square. These exhibits were multifaceted and heart-wrenching. For example, there was a table of 137 places going down one direction. I guess that's almost equivalent to a first down in a football field, something like, all empty yellow chairs and plates. That was unbelievable to see the amount. It's kind of like in one federation that we were in Palm Beach, they had a booth of 6 million pennies, so you could really understand the enormity. So this was 137 yellow chairs. You also saw in different exhibits yellow clusters of these, I guess, ribbons. Jeff called them tie a yellow ribbon, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what it was for. And they had names on them, and they were about 6 feet tall, and they were an exhibit someone had made. And you saw another exhibit of empty chairs, yellow, with the names and faces of every person who was a hostage, as if they were sitting in an auditorium. To exit this exhibition, you had to go through a tunnel with all their pictures surrounding you, kind of like at the memorial in Washington, D.C., with the children all around as you go through the faces. And you could only get out going towards a beacon of light. Now, Sorel, I was so glad I was able to do it. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. Generally speaking, as Jeff mentioned, they had volunteers to Israel and since the 80s, usually about 4,000, 5,000 people per year, which is a good amount for one organization. Since October 7th, Sorel said, they have had, at this point, close to 45,000 volunteers from all over the world. These volunteers are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And in our group of 37, there were primarily mid to late 60s. We were the oldest, except by 2 others, 2 men who were in their 80s, 81 and 84. I worked with the 84-year-old, which I'll tell you about shortly. And he got there, he said, because every time his application was rejected, he filled it out again and sent it right back in. And they finally said, okay. Our supervisors were soldiers, women soldiers, 19, 21, 23. One of the 19-year-olds came from Ukraine only 3.5 months ago and immediately joined the Army. Our work details varied. We all did different components, as Jeff mentioned, of assembling emergency medical kits to replenish and ship back on trucks to the fronts and anywhere else they were needed to be in the country. When we had finished our week, all of us, 24 trucks with 5,000 emergency medical kits were sent out of our Tel Shomer Medical Army Base back to Gaza. My work detail was twofold. I started in air conditioning. This is July in Israel, don't forget, with 3 women doing assembly line of putting different things into plastic bags, gauzes, medical scissors, sponges, and so on. Then, and as I had always heard them say, don't ever volunteer if you're in the Army. Well, I did. They asked for a volunteer to help in another area because one person needed to switch his job. So I said yes. Little did I know we would be working outside in the heat under a lanai, which is why the fellow from Australia needed to switch because it was affecting his blood pressure. Thank goodness I have good blood pressure. We were in the outdoors because the air-conditioned warehouse for our space was quite small, and we needed to have tables, so we couldn't be indoors. We checked and counted pain medications to send to the troops. We checked by lot numbers and did a count of how many vials of each kind of each medicine was available. And we are talking fentanyl, morphine, Demerol, Valium, and other high-dosage pain medication. The three of us checked close to 5,000 ampules, and we're talking about this big, and you have to read the lot number. I worked with two men, one of which was the 84-year-old out in the heat. And he was a retired pharmacist, so he was able to also explain to us what it was that we were saying. But by this time in at least my life, I knew what some of these things were. The other fellow was 75 and a mental health professional. I was able, because I was the only one who could pretty much speak Hebrew, to get our supervisors to find us at least a floor fan so that the air could circulate on us, because we had the heat directly coming at us, and there was a wall behind us that another warehouse supervisor could not open those doors because he would have to move too many boxes. They finally, after a couple of days, were able to convince other supervisors to donate fans, and they brought back two. And by circulating, it helped a lot. So we had some cross-ventilation. For me and for others, knowing what we were doing with packing and sorting these medical kits, and that they were going to young soldiers, a bit older than our own grandchildren, into war zones, was quite emotional. Every day, we all mustered each morning to do flag raising in our uniforms, which they had provided to us for our time on the base. And then we sang Hatikva. By the end of the week, this also was very emotional. We all recognized the importance of what our volunteering was really doing. I repeat, I am so glad I was able to do this. For me, this volunteering continued a family active connection. A great uncle of mine before 1947 sent guns smuggled with textiles from his basement in Brooklyn to a textile factory he had established in the Kfar Saba area for David Ben-Gurion and the newly formed Haganah. So I really felt I was doing my bit like my family did. And now, just 2.5 weeks ago, we heard about a drone that attacked Tel Aviv and hit a building around the corner of the Maxim Hotel, where many of us had stayed before starting Sarel. We ourselves stayed at a hotel walking distance to the Tel Aviv Masorte Shul, so we weren't at the Maxim. But this reinforced for us how scary this could really be, and brings home even more the importance of volunteering. And now the war is in its 300th day. We can only hope for a definitive ceasefire, and we can hope that other countries will understand that in a war, you just have to seek to kill the enemy. That's what war is. Thank you for listening, and I hope if some of you have heard this before, as we said, you're okay with having heard it again. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.